Welcome to the Friday edition of Juan's World, and this will be the third in my series on travel, and today we're going to look at the Uruguayan coastal port of Colonia del Sacramento. Now this is a fairly small port city opposite Buenos Aires on the Rio de la Plata, and it's changed hands quite a number of times. It began as a Portuguese colony in the 16th century, at the time when the Portuguese and the Spanish were really battling out how South America was going to be divided up. And the Portuguese had a very large colony in the area that's now Brazil, but they wanted it to extend further south, and so they opened up, among other things, the port city of Colonia, which was heavily fortified as much as anything else, as a land grab opportunity. And from that point on, during the colonial period, that is up until the period of the Napoleonic Wars, the beginning of the 19th century, Colonia went back and forth between Spanish and Portuguese hands, and finally ended up in Spanish hands, and then became part of Uruguay. And you can see its strategic location opposite Buenos Aires. You can take a ferry to Colonia directly from a port in Buenos Aires. Takes about an hour to cross the river, and you don't need a passport typically. If you're a foreigner, you probably do, but nobody checks them because both Uruguay and Argentina are part of Mercosur. Mercosur is the South American equivalent of the European Union. There's free travel and work and all of that between all the Mercosur countries. So you just hop on a ferry, hop over to Colonia, do what you want to do for the day, and hop back. And there's plenty of ferries, several a day in each direction. And a lot of people actually used to make this trip back in the days when the peso was sinking rapidly. Not to say that it's not sinking rapidly now, but it was particularly bad at one point, and people could not buy dollars in anywhere in Argentina, but not in Buenos Aires. And so they would hop across to Colonia, use their debit cards in the ATMs in Colonia, get whatever dollars they could, stuff them in a sock or somewhere where they could hide them, and come back to Buenos Aires. Well, that's been made illegal as of a long time ago. That is, debit cards that are issued by Buenos Aires are not valid in Uruguayan ATMs anymore, to stop that from happening. But there's other ways to go to Colonia for other reasons, and I went across I think about 10 years ago. I think it was about 2012. I went over with a friend of mine for a vacation, really, just to look around, and then we were going to take a bus from there to Montevideo, the capital of Uruguay, which in a lot of ways is has a lot more going for it. Colonia is a very, very small town. If you want to go to the historic district, it's got a lot in it in general, in the way of industry and mercantile stuff, but not a tremendously interesting place. But the historic port, which is where I went and where I'm going to show you today, is quite fascinating, and very rarely do I see foreigners there. When I say foreigners, I mean people from outside of South America. You see, perhaps Paraguayans and Bolivians and Argentinos and all that, but I don't believe I saw even one European when I was there. I was there for a couple of days before moving on to Montevideo. And so here's just a little view of what you can get out of Colonia. Now, the first thing that you will, of course, be aware of is the maritime nature of Colonia. And you'll also be aware of its military history. And so if you climb anywhere around the fort on the Rio de la Plata, you'll find some old cannons, maybe fortification walls and so forth. Very typical 16th, 17th century military architecture. Certain amount of climbing around hills. And the general scenery from various vantage points, to me, was always attractive. The streets are pretty much lined with historic buildings, and so you walk up and down and you'll find a lot of things to photograph, or at least if you're like me and you're a photographer, you'll find a lot of things worth training your camera at. Maybe not necessarily the most magnificent. There's not any great palace here, or even really a church of any great merit. I mean, there is a church, and it's got some features that are notable, but it's just the general air of the town that I appreciated. Wandering up and down the various streets, sometimes looking for something to eat. And in particular, I mean, perhaps, I don't know if I can say this definitively, but the lighthouse at Colonia is certainly central, and it's not functional anymore. I'm not sure what they use to warn maritime traffic these days, but not the lighthouse. So you can go inside it, and you can ascend, and you can look out over the river and over the town itself, and also some very attractive views. And then the one thing that just absolutely floored me was the number of old cars in the town. I don't know why it is. I mean, it's not as if they don't have the ability to get new cars, but there were just so many vintage cars. And this one in particular, this last one, I made several memes out of this, because there it is. It's just a nice old car with shrubs growing out of it because it's been in the same spot for so long. That just sort of sums up Colonia for me, I guess. It's just this place that time forgot. So here's my dish of the day to end this short expedition. I'm actually at a conference right now. When you're viewing this, I'm making all of this week's videos ahead of time because I'm going to be out of town for a week at a conference and very busy and can't take the time to make videos. But I will get back to it next week, and a little lengthier perhaps, I hope they're all entertaining, but a bit more entertaining perhaps. And I'm not sure where we're going to go from here. I've kind of dotted around England, Vietnam, Uruguay, so don't know where I'm going to go from here. But have a wonderful weekend, and make sure you tell your friends about my videos. Please like, please subscribe, and I'll come back on Tuesday with a brand new episode.